Hello again, my name is Anne Marie Zansel, and welcome to Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA Plus Stories. I am an ordained minister, bereavement counselor, conversationalist, spiritual wanderer, later in life lesbian, change maker, blogger, author, mom of 4 beautiful children, wife to my lovely wife, Tonda McKay, a northerner living in the South and trying to figure it all out. I share the stories of people who are coming out later in life to the LGBTQIA plus community and other queer stories. These stories are compelling, heartbreaking, joyful, and inspirational. I started this podcast because we need to normalize exploration of sexuality and gender at all ages. Plus, visibility is vital to the queer community. It's never too late to be who we are created to be. My guest proved that. Rebecca is a mom of 3 who works as a clinical psychologist specializing in reproductive mental health and parenting. Over the past 3 years, she made the incredible, difficult decision to end her marriage and leave Orthodox Judaism to live authentically as an openly gay woman. Welcome, Rebecca. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Anne Marie.
So, Rebecca, tell me your story.
So I think it probably starts in childhood. I grew up as the oldest of 5 kids in a family that was becoming more religious in Orthodox Judaism. And my family was really drawn to it because of the strong family emphasis on family and family meals and family time and the spiritual elements. And I grew up, I really liked the structure and rules and the sense of community. And I, as a pre-adolescent, I made a lot of good friends in that community and kind of jumped right in. I think it was always at odds with, some feminist and progressive values that my parents held, but I kind of sat with the contradictions in it. And I married my best friend quite young, right after college. And he is a rabbi, very progressive and a lovely human being. And we were married for 17 years. And, about 3 years ago, I fell in love with a woman and began the difficult journey of self-exploration to figure out what on earth that meant and what it meant about me and what it meant about my marriage and my future. And it has been a very difficult journey to try to figure that out. And I did make the decision to leave my marriage so that I could live authentically as gay, and also made the decision to stop following Orthodox Judaism, which was a long process for me, probably over the course of the past 10 years, longer than kind of my exploration about my sexuality. And here I am today.
So I have some questions for you.
Okay.
So a lot of times when people, as my observation as somebody who is in faith, though Christianity, is that a lot of times people gravitate when there's a lot of chaos in a home when people are younger, or chaos in a home. Sometimes people that have sort of chaotic homes sort of gravitate towards more conservative religious traditions because it has all the rules and all the answers, and you know exactly what to do in it, and it just provides everything. It just tells you if you do this, this, and this, then this, and this will happen. Was that like for you when you were young in your family? Or, I mean,
Not
like it's
really.
very it's unusual. Most people fall away from faith, you know, but your family went towards it. So what do you think the impetus for that was?
For my family, I think it was my parents were living away from family. They were both physicians and busy building their careers. And my dad was working long hours, and the structure of religion created dedicated family time.
Mhm.
Hard to implement without the structure of religion. I think my dad is very intellectual and spiritual, and
Mhm.
was drawn to a lot of those aspects of Judaism. Um, I think for me, I don't think my family was chaotic
Mhm.
exactly. In 5 kids, there's going to be some chaos, but
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I was a rather anxious kid. And I think religion gave me a sense of structure and control. If I do this, like good things are going to happen, or, you know, this is what I do. And there was less uncertainty within the framework of religion, which I think for me was what drew me to it.
Did it help your anxiety?
I think it probably accommodated my anxiety. I don't think it got to the underlying core issue.
So what do you mean by accommodate? I don't understand.
It, it was a band-aid in certain ways, where I didn't have to face certain choices because they were taken away with
Mhm.
religion. It's like I didn't have to go to the big public high school where I had to deal with, hundreds of classmates. I could go to a school where I literally had 3 kids in my class.
Mhm.
And so for kind of being socially anxious, if I could do it under the framework of religion, I could make that choice. I didn't have to face certain fears.
Mhm.
Um, I also kind of had an idea of like what's expected of me. What are my next steps in life? What am I supposed to do? And having the sense that like there's, a reason and I'm supposed to serve God in these ways, I think I found appealing and gave me a sense of safety and comfort.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think it didn't get to the core of why I was anxious. It just helped me avoid certain situations that might have been triggering.
Well, because you and I have talked, and because you were, I mean, I view it was interesting. Rebecca and I were talking, and I view her as like such this modern career woman, and she is all that. But she was talking about not having ever been in a bar before, or not going out dancing and drinking, and I was like, God, I didn't even think about that with you. And
Mhm.
so there were things as you grew up in modern America. There are
Mhm.
things as a young woman you didn't do, like, and so what are some of those things?
So I grew up modern Orthodox, where there's more of an integration with secular culture
Yeah.
and religious culture. So, all of the rules aren't followed, but I think there were, stricter gender expectation roles. And, to some extent, boys were allowed to experiment sexually or with drugs or alcohol, but girls who made that choice were seen as, I mean, I hate to use the word, but they were like a slut, or,
Mhm.
they're not good girls. And I was a good girl. I followed the rules. I think I had a lot of social anxiety. So the idea of like dancing at a concert or totally terrified me. But if I didn't do it because I was religious, I had something to hide behind. So I didn't go to a concert until I was in my 30s. I don't think that's true for every modern Orthodox teen.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of modern Orthodox Jewish teens do go to bars, but a lot don't. So there's some
Mhm.
very there, but I didn't go to a concert. I didn't go to a dance. Growing up, like you're not really supposed to touch people of the opposite sex, not even like a high five.
Mhm.
Um, and as I went through high school, I became more religious in that regard of like following those rules and dressing modestly, like going from wearing pants to not wearing pants.
Mhm. Mhm. So a quick question. Can you drink in modern Orthodoxy?
You can. I think there's still, I think this sense that women don't drink as much as the men,
Mhm.
that like good girls don't drink. So
It sounds like there's
not like an actual law against
yeah,
drinking
but
alcohol.
it sounds like there's a lot of emphasis on how women are supposed to behave. And
Yeah.
is there equalness on the sense of how men are supposed to behave? And are women held more accountable for their behavior versus men?
Yes, I mean, I think that while they talk about modesty, for example, and, women, there are a lot of rules about modesty. Like women are supposed to cover their collarbone and cover their elbows, and they have to wear skirts that cover their knees. And some people say they have to wear stockings or cover their legs or can't wear sandals. Don't wear a bathing suit. When you're married, you cover your hair with a wig or hat. And while they say, well, that's for your own integrity and dignity, there's also kind of this undercurrent of, well, you don't want the men to be attracted to you and sin.
Mm-hmm.
And then the women are needing to take on burden to accommodate men.
Right.
And
it's sort of like a lot like this. It's similar in very conservative Christian cultures too, that you dress a certain way so that you don't invite attention of men because you're responsible for their behavior ultimately.
yeah, I think, and I think for me, some of these messages were more subtle. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my parents were well educated. They grew up
Yeah.
in Jewish um, families. My mom was a huge feminist growing up, and still we're very socially liberal. So it was hard to reconcile some of the messages that I got of like, you have to achieve, like you better go to college, go to graduate school, have a prestigious career.
Mm-hmm.
But also family is the most important thing. You're supposed to be a mother, you're supposed to be a wife. And like that's what good girls do.
Well, and it also makes your plate incredibly full.
Yeah.
To do, because I know your job, I know what you do, and it's a very important job, and you've trained hard to do this job. And also I know I know how much you would love your children, and like how much you're like you're always talking about baking cookies with them or doing this with them and taking walks and stuff like that. That is a very busy, full life.
Yeah. And I had a lot of conflict about that. Ironically, I chose becoming a psychologist because I thought it was a more family friendly field than, for instance, medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wanted to have work family balance. And, as a rabbi's wife, even though my husband didn't explicitly, he would never put those types of expectations on me, did I did a lot of entertaining. So a lot of cooking and hosting people new to the community or new to the school. And, I went through different periods that I worked more or less to be able to manage family responsibilities, like, taking the mommy track, a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm. But
And
that's changed now, right? In some ways, because now that you're divorced now, and so has that changed for you?
yes, I'm working full time
Mm-hmm.
now. And I, I certainly being divorced and co-parenting, my husband and I are no longer, there's much less of the division of labor. He does laundry in his house, even though I always used to do the laundry. And now I screw things together and have a power tool. And, I'm very proud of myself for being able to do
And
that.
that's
But
very gay, Rebecca, to have
yeah,
your own power tools.
yeah, I was, the person who never did that. I didn't know how to do that. I never managed money. And being divorced has forced me to be able to learn how to do certain things that I really delegated to my husband to do.
Mhm.
Because I was like kind of anxious about them, or they were out of my comfort zone. And
Mhm.
in that way, it's been both scary and empowering.
Mhm. Absolutely. So you said that like that your deconstruction of your faith started like 10 years ago, way before you started to think about your sexuality. Um what happened? Like, why did you start saying, okay, wait a minute, maybe this isn't where I belong anymore?
So, my husband and I went through pretty significant infertility and
Mhm.
recurrent miscarriages over the course of 5 years after having our oldest daughter. And it was a brutal time. And particularly in a community where everyone has a baby every other year.
Mhm.
So all of my friends were constantly pregnant, and I had a really difficult time kind of being a part in the community and trying to be a community figure in the community when I was suffering so privately and kind of needing to pretend like everything was okay. And I got very angry at God, I think, but more so at the Jewish community for how difficult it is to be different in any way.
Mhm.
Um, very little room for heterogeneity, and you know, and this was not by my choosing. And I know people go through tragedy all the time and can bring up existential questions. And for me, it was less about God and more about kind of the structure of the community that felt really harmful to me.
Mhm.
I think there are many benefits of a community. People are always ready to cook for you when you have a baby, or if you lose someone. But everyone's also like knows everything about what's going on, and there's not a lot of privacy
Mhm.
and not necessarily understanding for people who are different in any way or don't follow the rules. And I think that was the beginning of the unraveling of my faith,
Mhm.
where I began to say, like, this is really hard for me. I don't know that I can live like this. I don't know that I like this. And I struggled with it for a long time, feeling like, well, I made the decision to be in this faith and to be married to someone who is dedicated to this faith, and I have to figure out a way to cope with it.
Mhm.
Um,
But you made that decision incredibly young, like you were 21 years old.
yeah, and I thought I knew everything.
Can I ask you a quick question? You keep, you've mentioned good girl a couple of times. And I was thinking about how when a good girl follows the rules, everything should, like, how, like when like, if I'm a good girl, this and this will happen. Well, you were a good girl and you still are a good girl, whatever that means, right? And so you you had to struggle with something that that for some people comes very easily, and you really had to struggle. Was that the, like, hey, listen, I've done everything right, um why is this happening? Like, when I look at my ordination pictures, Rebecca, they are so painful for me to look at, because it is the last picture of myself, my ex-husband, and my 4 kids standing in front of a church with my robes on.
Yeah.
And it was like, fuck God, I have been such a good girl. And like, my world just got torn apart when I came out. And so, like, that's how I was so angry, because I had been a good girl, and like, I'd gotten married, I did everything I was supposed to do, and I still wasn't happy. And did you, like, did that happen with you too, or was it something else?
I think I think I did have this sense of like, oh, I thought like if you do everything right, good
Mhm.
things happen.
You
You know,
dot your I's and cross your T's.
yeah, and I did. It's like I studied hard, so I got into college. I went to graduate school. It's like you just, you're nice to people and people are nice back, and this like cause and effect. And so you know, the fact that I couldn't get pregnant and people around me were getting pregnant did feel really unfair. So then I had this realization, okay, like life isn't fair. I
Mm-hmm.
was wrong to expect that it would be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I
Well,
think I felt very constricted by the structure of the Jewish community, in that I felt fake. I felt the necessity to put on a face and be like, I'm okay, it doesn't matter. And I didn't want to do that for the sake of the Jewish community. I wanted privacy to mourn. I wanted the ability to explore, to act out my anger at God
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't really have. Like if I wore pants, someone's going to report it back to the principal that, the rabbi's wife is wearing pants. And I wanted more independence than I had from the Jewish community. So for me, I didn't want to follow all the rules. And I kind of felt like, well, God's going to understand if there's a God. I think at this point I sort of landed on agnostic.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I didn't really feel like God would care. But I
If
knew
you
that
wore
other
pants or
people would
not,
care.
no, I don't think I would care.
And that I didn't like it that other people could dictate what I could or couldn't do if I didn't really want to. I think I
So,
felt very frustrated. Like it wasn't really part of my values
mhm.
to maybe not wear pants, but I felt like I had to, or to cover my hair because that's what you do if you belong to this community. And I don't want to make people upset.
Mhm.
So being a good girl came at a cost to my.
Well, and also worrying about what other people think, right?
Yeah, I've always been really good at that.
Yeah, but you're actually have really, really grown because
Yeah.
so as you unpacked all this stuff, did it start opening doors for you to consider other things? And I'm talking about specifically about your sexuality now. And I know you met somebody, and that's often we in our later in life community, we call that a catalyst. And there are some women that, come out and they haven't met anybody, but there are some women that meet somebody and all of a sudden, it makes them start to question their sexuality and question that, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not straight because I find this person attractive. So
Yeah.
what
I mean,
happened with you?
I think certainly I thought, maybe the stress of, and I want to be mindful of privacy, but
Mhm.
I kind of thought I wasn't a physical person.
Mhm.
Um, and, and it was a deficiency in me. I
Mhm.
never considered that I was gay. I never really thought about it.
Mhm.
And boys liked me in high school and I liked
Mhm.
that they liked me.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I never really thought about it. It also wasn't ever modeled for me. I
Right.
remember,
There was no representation in your community whatsoever.
no. And so it never even occurred to me or had, that people really did that. I sort of knew about it, but it was on the periphery. Um, and so I think that in certain ways, my work paved the path for me to consider, other aspects of my identity. So, for instance, working with women to help them find their voice and
Mhm.
empower them kind of made me look inward at ways that I was unhappy and how I wanted to find my voice. And I think it started as professionally, becoming more
Mhm.
confident professionally and taking on more leadership roles. And then um, kind of challenging some of my preconceived notions about myself and others and realizing how much social conditioning and played a role in my identity. And I guess, how am I trying to say this? That I accepted certain things as facts because of my experiences and my culture, but my job helped me see different aspects of my city, different aspects of different communities, of different religions, of different races, of different experiences, socioeconomic. And I realized, I think I realized how insular and sheltered and privileged my upbringing was. And
Mhm.
I think it kind of burst a lot of bubbles and I had to look at myself more honestly.
Well, it being exposed to diversity is the best thing that can ever happen to us
Yeah.
because you realize that there are so many different ways to live your life than the one you were taught. And you were taught to live your life that condition, to live your life that way. And you had gone to a Jewish, a Jewish high school where there was 3 kids in your class and probably a Jewish college, did you?
I went
Yeah.
to a Jewish college
Yeah.
also.
So, it was just small and insular and everybody was the same way. And I think about the the children that were so obviously gay that they had a glass closet, the kids like that.
Mhm.
And how did they survive in a community like that? They probably left pretty early, did
Mhm.
they?
I think some did. I think, definitely there was a range of acceptance, I think,
Mm-hmm.
uh, different families.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think it's really hard to be an integrated member of Orthodox Judaism, at least in my city, being openly gay. It's
Mm-hmm.
just when marriage isn't accepted, it's a sin to act on,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like gay sex.
So like in Leviticus, they specifically talk about male, and it's more about um, uh, power, and sexuality and power. Like, is it considered sinful for women as well?
So I don't know. I don't fully know. I think it has been written about. I don't know that it appears anywhere in the Bible, almost
Mhm.
because I don't like women were kind less relevant
Right.
in general. I think it might be less of a sin almost because it wasn't acknowledged as a thing.
Mhm.
Um, but as I've um, kind of moved on in my life, I realized that a friend of mine told me, oh, well, Ruth and Orpah were like, actually, there's a lot of people that say that they were gay. And ironically,
Ruth and Naomi too.
Ruth and Naomi, yeah,
Yeah.
have, and I have a beautiful watercolor print of the book of Ruth. That's rainbow, actually, that my dad gave me when I was a kid. And now it has a whole new meaning to me. And I have it in my new house. But
I actually have a book about Ruth and Naomi by Joan Chittister, who's a very famous Roman. She's a nun. I'm not sure if she's Episcopal or Catholic, but she is. It's beautiful, and it's You're right. It has a rainbow on the back. It has a rainbow somewhere on the cover.
yeah,
Yeah.
it felt very symbolic to me when I realized that. But I, so I'm sorry, now I forget the initial question and whether
Well,
I
we
answered
were
or
just,
not.
I believe we were talking about if sexuality sex between women were a sin, but we can move on from that because you
Mhm,
said that you really don't know in Orthodox
mhm.
Judaism. So I guess my next question is that you started to fall in love with somebody, and since we're just really sort of focusing on the religious part of this, what happened for you when you started to realize probably, oh shit, I'm falling in love with somebody? And it's somebody that I'm attracted to, and in a way that I've never been attracted to somebody in before in my life. Like what was going through your head? Like, I can only imagine how, I'm assuming, overwhelmed you must have felt.
Yeah, that would be an understatement. I think it's completely destabilizing
Hmm.
to realize that I thought I knew myself, and really um, kind of aspects of myself that I had taken at face value and as facts were suddenly challenged. And I think I am a person that really always likes to strive for the truth. And a value of mine is authenticity and being
Hmm.
genuine. And once I started to realize this about myself, I needed to figure it out. I couldn't put it back in the box. I needed to figure out what it meant about me. And I was honest with my husband about that. It was very difficult for him and for me. But I couldn't accept aspects of myself anymore,
Hmm.
that I was not physical, um,
Hmm.
that, that I could be content um, in a heterosexual marriage.
Hmm.
And I needed to figure out what this meant about me. And, I stopped being a good girl and broke a lot of rules. Um,
But did you stop being a good girl, or did you become an authentic girl?
well, I guess it depends on
Yeah,
who's defining it. I think
yeah.
stopped following the rules of my community and the norms. I think it's interesting that you asked before, like, is lesbian sex a sin? And I'm like, I don't know exactly, but it's certainly not accepted
Mhm.
culturally within
Mhm.
Orthodox Judaism. So there's this dichotomy of like what's Jewish law and what's culture. And I
Mhm.
think I have the biggest problem with is the culture aspects of the culture. There are many beautiful aspects, but that I
Mhm.
feel like are polarizing or judgmental.
So I know this has been a long process for you. It's been a couple of years at least. And, what has been the repercussion? I know that you and your ex-husband have a very cordial and loving co-parenting relationship with your children and stuff. But what has been the ramifications for you personally within the community now that you've sort of left it and you're not the rabbi's wife anymore? Like what has happened and how have you overcome some of the things that have happened?
Well, I think a lot of people are either personally hurt by my decision, don't agree with my choices, and aren't talking to me.
Mhm.
Um, there have been some people who have reached out in incredibly warm and authentic ways and supportive. And there's some people that talk about me behind my back or won't sit with me. And I don't fully know entirely. I mean, I am isolated from the Jewish community. I'm not participating in a lot of the activities that I used to, which I know is hard for my kids who still go to a Jewish day school and synagogue. But I don't feel able to do that right now. To some extent, I'm isolated. I
Mhm.
also feel free of needing to do something that I don't believe in.
Mhm. Mhm. How do
Really,
your kids feel about you? Like I know we want to be really respectful of their privacy as well, but how is it for them as be like, mom's done something that um is not quote unquote acceptable within the community. Um, how have you, let me ask it like this, how have you helped them navigate that?
I think through honesty, I
Mm-hmm.
think acknowledge how difficult it might be and how strange it is to see your mom go through a transformation that
Mm-hmm.
impacts much. And have used it as an opportunity to talk about diversity and different choices and love and acceptance of
Mm-hmm.
different people. I think there are times that it's really hard for my kids,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not there with them during certain religious events. Um, and I think it's hard to understand, I mean, kind of from their developmental stage about complexity of my decisions and the situation. But I do hope that they will come to understand. And I want to be respectful of their choices with regard to religion, and not push an agenda on them,
Mm-hmm.
which can be challenging. I have to resist the urge sometimes.
You have to keep
Yeah.
that, keep the mouth shut.
Yeah. Give
Yeah.
them, but, um, I think it was really heartbreaking when, one of my kids said, well, can you wear a skirt when you come to school?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's the recognition that I'm different maybe than other women in the school,
Mm-hmm.
and how to navigate that. Do I say, okay, I'll make you more comfortable, or do I say, I'm going to be myself? And some people might not like that, but everyone's different. Or do I say it's respectful in that place that I would wear a skirt?
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to try to consider that and take my own feelings at times to set them aside to kind of figure out what my kids need has been
Mm-hmm.
important. And
Well,
talking with my co-parenting partner.
Well, I can imagine that's really hard because you didn't want to wear skirts when you were like married to their dad and fully involved in the community. And now it's like, uh, oh, honey, I don't really want to do that. But, the thing is that I think sometimes our kids don't understand in the moment. But I think when 10 years from now, when they're, young adults, they will. They'll understand why. But in the moment, they just like, especially if they're middle schoolers or grade schoolers, they want their parents to be like everybody else's parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's challenging whether kids are young or my adult children had a hard time with that too. And not just that mom and dad got divorced and they just wanted to be like every other family and they're not anymore. And it's been really interesting to watch them assimilate all the changes in their life, and including one of their siblings coming out as non-binary. And like we went from like white straight family to a queer family pretty damn quick in a couple of years, and it was really challenging for all of them, so I understand.
Well, that gives me some hope.
Yeah, and also too, I find that a lot of times kids when they're younger, they just don't understand things, but I think they have two loving adults. Your children in particular have two very loving adults in their lives, and they will probably understand things when they get older and may not agree with it, but will still be respectful of the choices. And I think we really want to be clear. The choices are not about whether you're gay or not. The choices is about how you're going to live your life as a queer person, because we've talked about this, and there are queer people that are not out within the Orthodox community because it's just not safe for them, or they just can't do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, thank you for sharing your story with me. I appreciate it. So I've got a question for you. Do you have a coming out song?
So I think I really like the song In the Blood by John Mayer,
Mm-hmm.
because I think to me it speaks about the impact of social conditioning and how much nurture versus nurture. And for me, coming out was a lot about unpeeling some of those layers,
Mm-hmm.
about, is it in my blood, or was it, how much of my mother, how much of my father?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really powerful of, messages that I heard that I internalized versus really figuring out. I think I worked very hard to be who I thought I was supposed to be, rather than really letting myself find out who I was, because that was really scary.
Mm-hmm.
No one asked me to do that, but
But I think to some degree, most people do that. I mean, I think we all sort of follow what our family expects us to follow. And there are the renegades, there are the rogues, there are people that, I would love, I've always been really curious about, like, my wife, and she came out like she got forced out of the closet. It was her mother's friend that told her parents that Tonda was gay. And so and then they disowned her, and so she had like no choice,
yeah.
so the queer community became her family, because her family basically at that time abandoned her. So so that's like, I think about like people that came out young, and what's the difference between them and us who've come out at older ages. And sometimes I think their queerness is not their journey to walk. They have other journeys they need to walk. So figuring out about themselves wasn't the thing they needed to do. They need to do other things. And that's sort of how I've reconciled all this. But I'm really curious about what makes people, like, especially people who are, maybe 40 and above, like, what makes some people come out so younger and figure it all out younger versus people that don't. And like, I think I've thought about this a lot, because I sort of had examples, but not, but I was in a very conservative Catholic family. So it just wasn't talked about. It wasn't an example. And I think that, like, I was so afraid of having any kind of relationship with a woman that, like, to me, I knew that if I started down that road, I didn't know if I could find my way back. And so that's like, I sort of put up a wall for that possibility. And so I wonder if that's for other people as well. I think you say for you, it was just that it didn't even occur to you until you fell in love, you know?
Yeah, I guess this Katy Perry song, I Kissed a Girl, and I
Like,
oh, that sticks out. I'm like, oh my, yeah, that's sort of certain ways. It's, it
yeah,
made me
that's
realize, like,
your second.
oh, this is why people make a big deal about this.
Well, yeah. And it's, oh, this is what, yeah, exactly. Why do people make a big deal about this? And like, I didn't understand any of that stuff until it happened to me. Like I was a skeptic about love and passion. I thought that was just sort of bullshit that was in movies and happened to an occasional person. I didn't see that in my life at all. It was really funny. My older sister, uh, once shared something about that. And I remember I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about this with you because she's 15 years older than me. So she's sort of like a mom image to me. And I'm like, and now I wonder if I was just terrified of it because I did, like, now I like think, like she was my sister. I should have been able to talk to her about something like that. But I was just terrified because she has a wonderful, loving relationship with her husband that she's been married to for 50 plus years. So, how about a book? Is there a book that really changed your perspective?
I don't know so much about my sexuality, but there's Far from the Tree by Andrew Solomon, which is essentially a book about parenting. And in the first chapter, he talks about how he's gay, and he talks about, for him, you know, parents have this idea, what does parenting really mean? We often think our kids are going to turn out like us, and our kids in reality have identities that are vertical to us. Well, you're interested in sports, so your kid's interested in sports. You're liberal, so your kid's liberal. Or horizontal identities. Well, you're straight, but your kid's gay. And it's not our job to make our kids like us. It's our job to help them be who they are. And again, I think that speaks to social conditioning. It was a very powerful moment in my own parenting and a shift in my parenting. And I think I thought a lot about my own experience of being parented. And whether it was my own internal perfectionism about like, this is who I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to have all these identities. I think it's very liberating to think about this type of parenting. And then his book goes on to give examples of parenting kids who are very different, have very different identities, from parenting a child with schizophrenia to parenting a criminal.
Wow. That sounds like a great book. I really sort of want to. Yeah, I
it's
sort of like
900 pages.
Oh my God, 900 pages. I don't know if I can commit to that. So how would you describe your life today?
Far more complicated, to some extent unpredictable. I think there's been a lot of grief and sadness and also unbelievable joy. I feel so brave in certain ways and free, to kind of make decisions without worrying about what other people think. I read this article that talked about just getting more comfortable with people thinking what they think about you. And it's, the quote was, I accept other people's faulty perceptions of me. I feel that a lot of like, I can't control how other people view my decision and choices. I know that I tried to navigate this as thoughtfully and carefully and kindly as possible. I know I made a lot of mistakes, but I really tried to do the best I could. And like, ultimately, that's what's most important to me. And other people are going to have their own opinions, and I can't control it, and I can't let it rule my life anymore.
Well, and I also think it's and I think a lot of us who come out later in life, we often live by the expectations of others. And we've done it our whole life. And a lot of us define ourselves as quote unquote good girls. And learning to let go of the expectations of others is what you need to do, is to live as a out queer person in the United States and a lot of the world. So you just have to not care. And it's
Mhm.
really amazing is like, as I have moved through this journey from going like, oh, what does everybody think, to like, I don't care what you think. I'm too tired. I've got other things to do. And it's nice to like have, and it sounds like for you as well, it's nice to have sort of freed yourself from that bondage.
Yeah, I think it's empowering on a lot of levels,
Mhm.
personal, religious, and so many of the expectations. I think I perceived other people were putting certain expectations on me, and they weren't necessarily. Um,
Yes.
I don't want to put it on other people entirely. I think a lot of it was my perfectionism and desire to please people, and
Mhm.
that complicated dynamic.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on this today, Rebecca. I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think it will bring a lot of other women um, just comfort to know that there's other women out there like you who have navigated all of the things that you have navigated. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity and for the work that you do
Thank you. It was nice seeing you today.
too.